The galaxy had known peace for centuries. For as long as anyone could remember, humanity thrived among the stars, exploring new worlds and building bridges with alien civilizations. It was a time of growth, discovery, and unity. But all of that changed when the Vracs arrived. No one saw them coming. They emerged from the depths of uncharted space like a storm, a relentless, devastating force that left destruction in their wake. The Vracs were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Towering insectoid creatures with armored exoskeletons, razor-sharp limbs and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the very soul. Their ships were equally monstrous, massive biomechanical constructs that pulsed with life, blending organic tissue with advanced technology. It began near Proxima, Centauri, humanity's closest stellar neighbor. A small scout ship commanded by Captain Ryan Mitchell stumbled upon the Vracs fleet while conducting routine scans of an asteroid belt. At first glance, the strange vessels appeared abandoned, drifting silently against the backdrop of distant stars. But Ryan's instincts screamed danger. He ordered his crew to stay cautious, scanning the area for signs of activity. That decision saved their lives. Without warning, the Vracs' ships came alive. Plasma cannons erupted from their hulls, firing beams of energy that tore through the void with terrifying precision. Ryan's ship barely escaped, its engines pushed to the breaking point as they fled back toward Earth. By the time they reached safety, the damage had already been done. The Vracs weren't just explorers or traders, they were predators, and humanity had unknowingly wandered into their hunting grounds. Back on Earth, panic spread faster than anyone could have imagined. News of the encounter dominated every channel, sparking fear and paranoia across the planet. Governments convened emergency meetings, scrambling to prepare defenses against an enemy they barely understood. Cities braced for invasion, stockpiling supplies and fortifying shelters. Militaries mobilized, deploying fleets to protect key colonies and outposts scattered throughout the solar system. But deep down, everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The Vracs were too powerful, too advanced, too unstoppable. Among those tasked with finding a solution was Dr. Laura Bennett, a brilliant astrophysicist who specialized in alien technology. Laura wasn't your typical scientist. She had a sharp wit, a no-nonsense attitude, and a knack for thinking outside the box. Her lab at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters buzzed with activity as she worked tirelessly to analyze data collected during Ryan's encounter. Every fragment of information mattered, every sensor reading, every piece of debris, every second of footage captured by the scout ship's cameras. If there was a weakness in the Vracs' armor, Laura was determined to find it. Working alongside her was General Alan Carter, a grizzled veteran of countless conflicts. With his weathered face, stern demeanor, and unwavering dedication to duty, Alan represented the old guard of military leadership. He didn't trust scientists or their fancy gadgets, preferring brute force and straightforward tactics. But even he couldn't deny the gravity of the situation. Humanity was facing extinction, and if Laura's theories offered even a sliver of hope, he was willing to listen. Their partnership started off rocky. Alan dismissed many of Laura's ideas as impractical or overly complicated, while Laura grew, frustrated with his resistance to innovation. But over time, a fragile respect developed between them. Alan recognized Laura's brilliance, and Laura appreciated Alan's experience. Together, they formed an unlikely team, one that might hold the key to humanity's survival. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kyle Parker became something of a legend overnight. A hotshot pilot known for his daring maneuvers and cocky attitude, Kyle had earned both admiration and irritation from his fellow soldiers. During the initial skirmish near Proxima Centauri, he single-handedly disabled one of the Vracs' command ships, buying precious time for Ryan's crew to escape. His actions made headlines, turning him into a symbol of defiance against the looming threat. But fame didn't sit well with Kyle. Beneath his confident exterior lay a man haunted by loss. His younger brother Jason had died years earlier during a training accident, a tragedy Kyle blamed himself for. Since then, he'd thrown himself into his work, seeking redemption in the cockpit of a fighter jet. Now with the fate of humanity resting on his shoulders, Kyle felt the weight of responsibility more than ever before. As days turned into weeks, the Vracs launched their first major assault. Mars, once a thriving colony and hub of human expansion, fell within hours. The attack came without warning, catching settlers and defenders alike completely off guard. Plasma beams rained down from the sky, obliterating cities and reducing landmarks to rubble. Swarms of biomechanical drones descended upon the surface, hunting survivors with ruthless efficiency. Billions watched in horror as live feeds showed the devastation unfold, broadcasting images of chaos and despair. The United Earth Defense Force responded with everything they had. Fighters screamed across the Martian skies, engaging the Vracs in dogfights that lit up the horizon. Capital ships unleashed barrages of missiles and laser fire, trying to punch through the enemy's defenses. But it wasn't enough. The Vracs adapted too quickly, countering every strategy almost instantly. Human forces were outmatched, outgunned, and overwhelmed. Despite the odds, Kyle refused to give up. Piloting his sleek interceptor, he weaved through waves of enemy fighters, taking down targets with pinpoint accuracy. His squadron followed close behind, trusting his instincts to guide them through the chaos. Time and again, they pushed deeper into enemy territory, striking at critical points and forcing the Vracs to divert resources. Each victory, no matter how small, gave humanity a fighting chance. Back on Earth, Laura analyzed fragments of wreckage recovered from Mars, searching for any clue that might explain the Vracs' advantage. Late nights blurred into early mornings as she pored over schematics and ran simulations. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly, a pattern hidden within the alien tech. The Vracs relied heavily on a central hive mind network coordinated by massive queen ships hidden deep within their fleets. These queens acted as the brains of the operation, controlling everything from troop movements to tactical decisions. If they could be neutralized, the entire Vracs force would collapse into disarray. Excited by her discovery, Laura rushed to share the news with Alan. But convincing him to act on her theory proved challenging. Sending a team to infiltrate a queen ship sounded like suicide, a gamble with astronomical risks and uncertain rewards. Yet Laura persisted, arguing that it was humanity's only shot at turning the tide. Finally, after hours of heated debate, Alan relented. Operation Black Dagger was born, a desperate mission to strike at the heart of the Vracs Empire. As preparations got underway, Kyle found himself assigned to the team. His skills made him indispensable, though his reckless nature worried some higher-ups. Joining him were Corporal Megan Hayes, a demolitions expert with nerves of steel, and Ethan Cole, a quiet but deadly sniper. Together they formed an unlikely trio, each bringing unique strengths to the table. Their mission was clear: infiltrate a queen ship, disable its neural link to the hive mind, and return alive, if possible. For Kyle, this was more than just another assignment. It was a chance to prove himself, to make amends for past failures and honor the memory of his brother. As he suited up for the mission, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with challenges none of them could fully anticipate. But one thing was certain: failure wasn't an option, not when the fate of humanity hung in the balance. And so, with determination burning in their hearts, the team set out on their perilous journey. Little did they know, the true test of their courage and humanity's resilience was only beginning. The Vracs were relentless. Their assault on Mars had been swift and merciless, leaving behind a barren wasteland where thriving colonies once stood. The images broadcasted across Earth were haunting: smoldering ruins, silent streets littered with debris, and the charred remains of what used to be homes and businesses. Humanity's dreams of expansion into the stars now felt like ashes scattered in the void. But amidst the despair there was also anger, an unyielding determination to fight back against the invaders who dared to threaten their existence. Lieutenant Kyle Parker sat alone in the cockpit of his fighter, staring at the glowing dashboard as if searching for answers hidden within its circuits. He replayed the events of the Martian battle over and over in his mind. Every decision he made, Every shot fired, every life lost, weighed heavily on him. Though he had managed to disable one of the Vrak's command ships during that chaotic retreat, it wasn't enough. The enemy fleet still loomed large, an unstoppable force that seemed invincible. Kyle clenched his fists tightly around the controls. Not again, he muttered under his breath. Not another failure. Jason's face flashed in his memory, his younger brother smiling, laughing, alive. Then came the crash. The accident Kyle couldn't prevent. That same guilt gnawed at him. Now, if humanity fell because he hadn't done enough, how could he ever live with himself? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the hatch. Startled, Kyle turned to see Megan Hayes standing outside, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Corporal Megan Hayes wasn't someone you ignored. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her sharp eyes always scanning, always calculating. Her reputation as a demolitions expert preceded her. She could dismantle anything, explosives, machinery, or even egos, with precision and efficiency. "What do you want?" Kyle asked gruffly, though not unkindly. "Just checking in," Megan replied, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "You've been holed up here for hours. Thought you might need some fresh air." "I'm fine," Kyle said quickly, avoiding her gaze. Megan raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she leaned against the wall, studying him intently. "Look, I get it, this mission's a long shot, but sitting here beating yourself up isn't going to change anything." Kyle glanced at her sharply. "And what would you know about it?" Megan shrugged. "Enough. You're not the only one carrying baggage, Parker. We all have our reasons for being here. What matters is whether we can put them aside when it counts." Her words struck a nerve. Kyle opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. There was no point denying it. She was right. Whatever guilt or fear he carried wouldn't help anyone. Not now. Not when so much depended on them succeeding. Before either of them could say more, the intercom crackled to life. General Alan Carter's voice echoed through the ship. "All personnel report to the briefing room immediately. Repeat, all personnel to the briefing room." Kyle and Megan exchanged glances before heading to join the others. The briefing room was already crowded when they arrived. Dr. Laura Bennett stood at the front, surrounded by holographic projections of star maps and schematics. Ethan Cole sat quietly in the corner, his sniper rifle resting against his chair. Unlike Kyle and Megan, Ethan preferred solitude, speaking only when necessary, yet there was something unsettling about his calm demeanor, a quiet intensity that hinted at a man capable of extraordinary focus. General Carter entered moments later, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Listen up," he began, his voice firm and authoritative. "We've identified a potential target, a Queen ship located near the edge of the Vrak's fleet. According to Dr. Bennett's analysis, this ship serves as a critical node in their hive mind network. Disable it, and we might cripple their operations in the sector." Laura stepped forward, taking over the explanation. "The Queens act as central hubs, coordinating everything from troop movements to tactical decisions. Without them, the Vraks lose cohesion. It's their greatest strength, and their biggest vulnerability. But getting close won't be easy," Carter added, grimly. "Their defenses are formidable, and any attempt to infiltrate will likely result in heavy casualties. That's why we're sending a small team instead of a full-scale assault. Speed and stealth are our best chances." Kyle felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, their chance to strike back. But the risks were undeniable. Infiltrating a Queen ship sounded suicidal even for someone like him who thrived on danger. Still, he didn't hesitate. "Count me in," he said firmly, raising his hand. Carter nodded approvingly. "Thought you'd say that, Parker. Hayes Cole, you're with him. Bennett will accompany you to guide the operation." Ethan gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. Megan simply smirked. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," she said. Over the next few days, the team prepared meticulously. Laura modified a stolen Vrak's cloaking device, allowing their shuttle to blend seamlessly with the alien fleet's energy signatures. She also equipped them with handheld scanners capable of detecting weak points in the Queen ship's defenses. Meanwhile, Megan assembled an arsenal of explosives tailored specifically for the mission, ensuring each charge packed maximum impact. Ethan spent hours calibrating his sniper rifle, testing its accuracy under various conditions. And Kyle? He flew countless simulations, honing his piloting skills until they became second nature. As launch day approached, tensions ran high. None of them knew what awaited beyond the veil of enemy territory. Would they succeed? Or would they vanish into the cold embrace of space, forgotten like so many others before them? Finally, the moment arrived. The team gathered aboard the shuttle, their expressions a mix of resolve and apprehension. Laura took her place at the navigation console, guiding them toward the designated coordinates. Kyle manned the controls, his hands steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Megan double-checked her gear, while Ethan kept watch through the viewport, scanning for signs of trouble. They passed through asteroid fields and abandoned space stations, remnants of civilizations long since extinguished. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional beep of instruments. Each passing hour brought them closer to their destination and closer to danger. It was during this tense journey that they encountered Daniel Monroe. A scientist stationed on one of the outer colonies, Daniel had been captured years ago during an earlier invasion. Somehow he had survived, enduring unimaginable horrors at the hands of the Vracs. When the team stumbled upon his makeshift hideout, a derelict cargo vessel drifting aimlessly, he was emaciated and barely coherent, yet his eyes burned with urgency as he spoke. "They're not just conquerors," Daniel rasped, clutching Laura's arm. "They harvest biological material, DNA, organs, tissues. They use it to fuel their expansion, to grow stronger." The revelation sent chills down everyone's spines. The Vracs weren't merely predators, they were parasites, feeding off other species to sustain their empire. It explained why their technology seemed so advanced, why their numbers appeared limitless. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to avoid becoming tools in the Vracs machine. Daniel begged to join the mission, claiming his knowledge of the enemy could prove invaluable. But his condition made that impossible. Reluctantly, the team left him behind, promising to honor his sacrifice by completing their objective. As they resumed their course, the weight of their mission grew heavier. This wasn't just about defeating the Vracs. It was about reclaiming their dignity, their freedom, their very humanity. When they finally reached the Queen ship, the sight was awe-inspiring and terrifying. Towering above them, the vessel pulsed with organic life, its surface shifting and writhing like a living organism. Massive tendrils extended outward, connecting it to smaller support ships clustered nearby. Plasma cannons bristled along its hull, ready to obliterate anything foolish enough to approach. Kyle guided the shuttle into a blind spot, using the cloaking device to mask their presence. Once docked, the team disembarked cautiously, weapons drawn. The interior of the ship was a labyrinth of twisting corridors bathed in eerie green light. Walls oozed viscous fluids, pulsating rhythmically as if breathing. Strange noises echoed through the air, clicks, hisses, and low rumbles that set their nerves on edge. Megan led the way, planting charges at strategic points to create diversions. Ethan covered their backs, his rifle trained on every shadow. Laura worked furiously to decipher alien symbols etched into the walls, piecing together the layout of the ship. And Kyle stayed alert, ready to react at a moment's notice. As they ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew increasingly hostile. Patrols of Vracs warriors roamed the halls, their insectoid forms moving with unnatural speed. More than once the team narrowly avoided detection, relying on quick reflexes and sheer luck to stay alive. Tensions mounted with each step, the realization dawning that escape might be impossible. But they pressed on, driven by a shared purpose. Failure wasn't an option, not when billions depended on their success. With every challenge overcome, their bond strengthened. They weren't just soldiers anymore, they were survivors united by a common goal. And then, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the chamber housing the Queen. What awaited them inside would test their courage, their ingenuity, and their humanity in ways none of them could have anticipated. The chamber housing the Queen was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was enormous, stretching far beyond their line of sight, its ceiling lost in shadows. The walls pulsed with a sickly green light, veins of glowing energy running through them like arteries. In the center of the room stood the Queen, a monstrous creature that dwarfed even their wildest imaginations. She was twice the size of their shuttle, her body a grotesque fusion of organic tissue and biomechanical enhancements. Her exoskeleton shimmered with an iridescent sheen, reflecting the dim light in unsettling patterns. Razor-sharp limbs extended from her torso, twitching and clicking as if eager to strike. At the front of her massive form was a cluster of glowing eyes, each one staring with an intelligence that seemed almost human and utterly alien. For a moment, no one moved. The sheer scale of the Queen froze them in place, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were facing. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she scanned the chamber, her mind racing to process the details. Megan tightened her grip on her weapon, her knuckles turning white. Ethan raised his sniper rifle, though he knew a single bullet wouldn't be enough to take down something this size. Kyle clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus despite the overwhelming sense of dread creeping up his spine. "We need to act fast," Laura whispered, breaking the silence. "If she detects us, we're dead." Megan nodded, already pulling out her explosives. "I'll set charges around the perimeter. That should buy us some time." "Time for what?" Kyle asked, his voice low but sharp. "We can't fight." Her head on. "She'll tear us apart." Laura turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "Not if we hit her where it hurts. Her neural link to the hive mind. It's her weakness. If we can overload it, we might be able to shut her down." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Ethan asked, his tone skeptical but tinged with curiosity. "I'll need access to her core processor," Laura explained. "It's embedded, deep within her chest cavity. Once I'm inside, I can upload a virus designed to disrupt her connection to the network." Kyle frowned. "You're going to hack into a living alien Queen while she's trying to kill us?" "It's our best shot," Laura said firmly, "and probably our only one." Before anyone could argue further, the Queen shifted. Her limbs clicked together loudly, the sound reverberating through the chamber like a warning. One of her glowing eyes locked onto them, narrowing slightly as if studying them. Then without warning, she lunged forward, her massive body moving with terrifying speed. "Move!" Kyle shouted, diving out of the way just as one of her claws slashed through the air where he had been standing moments before. The others scattered, dodging the flurry of attacks as the Queen unleashed her fury. Megan wasted no time. While the others distracted the Queen, she sprinted toward the edges of the chamber, planting charges at key points along the walls. Each explosion would weaken the structural integrity of the chamber, hopefully slowing the Queen down, or at least giving them cover to regroup. But the task wasn't easy. Every step felt like walking through molasses, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on her chest. The Queen's movements shook the ground beneath her feet, making it hard to keep her balance. Still, Megan pushed forward, her determination unwavering. Meanwhile, Ethan positioned himself behind a thick pillar of pulsating biomass, using it as cover while he lined up shots. His first bullet struck the Queen's leg, causing her to stumble, momentarily. Encouraged by this small victory, he fired again and again, targeting vulnerable spots in her armor. Each hit drew an angry hiss from the Queen, her glowing eyes flashing brighter with rage. But Ethan knew he couldn't keep this up forever. His ammunition was limited, and the Queen's resilience made every shot feel futile. Kyle, meanwhile, found himself face to face with the Queen more than once. Using his agility and quick reflexes, he darted between her limbs, avoiding her attacks while looking for an opening. He carried a plasma cutter strapped to his belt, a last-ditch weapon, meant for cutting through metal, not alien flesh. But desperate times called for desperate measures. When the Queen reared back, preparing to strike, Kyle seized the opportunity. He leaped onto one of her legs, climbing upward until he reached her torso. Clinging to her armored shell with one hand, he activated the plasma cutter with the other, aiming for the joints connecting her limbs to her body. The queen roared in pain as the cutter sliced through her exoskeleton, sending sparks flying. She thrashed wildly, trying to dislodge him, but Kyle held on tight, gritting his teeth against the strain. Finally, he managed to sever one of her limbs, which fell to the ground with a deafening crash. The victory was short-lived, however. The queen retaliated with renewed ferocity, swiping at him with her remaining claws. Kyle barely escaped, tumbling off her body and landing hard on the floor below. While all this chaos unfolded, Laura worked frantically to reach the queen's core processor. Dodging debris and narrowly avoiding being crushed by the queen's flailing limbs, she made her way closer to the center of the chamber. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the pulsating mass of tissue that served as the queen's brain. Tubes of glowing liquid connected it to the rest of her body, feeding her with data and energy from the hive mind network. Laura pulled out a handheld device, connecting it to one of the tubes. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as she began uploading the virus. "Hurry up!" Kyle yelled from across the chamber, narrowly dodging another attack. "She's not going to wait much longer." "I'm working as fast as I can," Laura snapped back, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she fought to maintain focus. The virus was complex, designed to infiltrate and corrupt the queen's neural pathways. But it required time. Time they didn't have. Just as Laura finished the upload, the queen let out a deafening screech. Her entire body convulsed, the glowing veins in her exoskeleton flickering erratically. For a brief moment, it seemed like the virus was working. But then, to everyone's horror, the queen's system stabilized. She turned her attention back to the team, her glowing eyes burning with hatred. "It didn't work," Laura cried, panic creeping into her voice. "The virus isn't strong enough." "What do we do now?" Megan shouted, throwing another charge toward the queen's legs. The resulting explosion sent chunks of biomass flying, but the queen barely flinched. Ethan fired off another round, hitting her chest plate. "We can't keep this up forever." Kyle glanced around the chamber, searching for any possible solution. His eyes landed on Daniel Monroe's notes, still clutched in Laura's hand. An idea sparked in his mind. "Daniel said they harvest biological material, right? To fuel their expansion?" "Yes," Laura replied, unsure where he was going with this. "Then maybe we can use that against her," Kyle said quickly. "If we overload her system with too much energy, it might cause a feedback loop, like blowing a fuse." Laura's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. "It could work, but it's risky. We'd need to channel a massive amount of power directly into her core." "Do it," Kyle ordered. "I'll hold her off." Before anyone could protest, Kyle charged forward, drawing the queen's attention away from Laura. He zigzagged between her limbs, shouting taunts to provoke her. The queen responded predictably, focusing all her efforts on crushing him. Meanwhile, Laura scrambled to modify the handheld device, rerouting its output to amplify the energy transfer. Megan and Ethan provided cover fire, keeping the queen distracted, long enough for Laura to complete her adjustments. Finally, Laura gave the signal. "Now get clear." Kyle dove out of the way as Laura activated the device, aiming it directly at the queen's core processor. A surge of energy shot through the air, striking the pulsating mass of tissue. The queen shrieked in agony, her body convulsing violently as the feedback loop took hold. Green light erupted from her core, spreading outward until it engulfed her entire form. Then, with a final ear-splitting scream, the queen collapsed, her massive body crashing to the ground with a thunderous boom. For a moment, there was silence. The team stared at the lifeless queen, their chests heaving as they struggled to catch their breath. They had done it. They had actually done it, but there was no time to celebrate. Alarms blared throughout the ship, signaling catastrophic failure. The queen's death had severed the connection to the hive mind network, plunging the Vrax fleet into chaos. But it had also destabilized the ship itself, triggering a countdown to self-destruction. "We need to get out of here," Megan shouted, grabbing Laura's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The team ran as fast as their legs could carry them, retracing their steps through the labyrinthine corridors. Behind them, the ship groaned and shuddered, sections of the wall collapsing, as the structure began to fall apart. Explosions rocked the halls, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Just when it seemed like they wouldn't make it, they burst into the docking bay where their shuttle waited. Kyle jumped into the pilot's seat, firing up the engines as soon as everyone was aboard. The shuttle lifted off just as the Queen ship imploded, the resulting shockwave propelling them forward like a slingshot. Through the viewport, they watched as the enemy fleet descended into disarray, ships colliding with each other or drifting aimlessly without direction. As they flew away, from the wreckage, the team sat in stunned silence. The shuttle hurtled through space, its engines roaring as it carried the battered but victorious team away from the wreckage of the Queen ship. Inside, the air was thick with exhaustion and relief. The adrenaline that had fueled their fight against the Vrax Queen was fading, leaving behind a deep weariness that settled into their bones. Yet none of them could fully relax. The mission had been successful, but they all knew the war wasn't over. Not yet. Kyle sat in the pilot's seat, his hands gripping the controls tightly. His knuckles were white, though not from fear this time. It was more a reflex, a way to keep himself grounded after everything they'd just endured. He glanced at the others through the rearview monitor. Megan was slumped against the wall, her head tilted back as she tried to catch her breath. Ethan sat silently in the corner, his sniper rifle resting across his lap, his expression unreadable as always. Laura, meanwhile, was hunched over her device, reviewing the data collected during their encounter with the Queen. Her face was pale, dark circles underlining her eyes, but there was a spark of determination still burning within her. "We did it," Kyle said finally, breaking the silence. His voice sounded strange even to him, hoarse and distant, like it belonged to someone else. "We actually pulled it off." Megan let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. "Yeah, no thanks to your reckless plan at the end. You almost got us killed." "Hey, it worked, didn't it?" Kyle shot back, though there was no real bite to his words. "Besides, you're welcome for saving our lives." Megan rolled her eyes but didn't argue further. She leaned forward, rubbing her temples. "Let's just hope we don't have to do anything like that again anytime soon. I'm running low on explosives and patience." Ethan spoke up then, his voice soft but steady. "It's not over. Even if we took out one Queen, there are others. They'll regroup, adapt." "He's right," Laura chimed in, looking up from her device. "The Queen ship we destroyed was critical, yes, but the Vrax aren't going to give up so easily. Their hive mind might be fractured now, but they'll find a way to recover unless we hit them harder. And faster." Kyle frowned, glancing at the star map displayed on the dashboard. "So what's next? We've already risked everything once. How much more can we take before we run out of luck?" Laura hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. She knew Kyle wasn't wrong. Every step forward came at a cost, and the toll was mounting. But she also knew they couldn't afford to stop, not when billions of lives depended on their success. "We strike while they're vulnerable," she said firmly. "General Carter needs to know about this. If we move quickly, we can target other Queen ships before they rebuild their network." "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" Megan asked, raising an eyebrow. "We barely made it out of there alive. What makes you think we can pull off another infiltration?" "We won't be alone this time," Laura replied. "If we share what we've learned, their weaknesses, their patterns, we can coordinate a larger effort. Multiple teams, simultaneous strikes. It's risky, but it's our best chance." Ethan nodded slowly, his sharp eyes narrowing as he considered her words. "It's a solid plan. Dangerous, but solid, assuming command agrees." "They will," Kyle interjected, his tone confident, despite the fatigue etched into his features. "After what we just did, they'll listen. Hell, they'll probably throw a parade for us first." No one laughed at his attempt at humor. The gravity of their situation hung heavy in the air. They weren't heroes. They were survivors. And survival meant pushing forward, no matter how daunting the path ahead seemed. When they returned to Earth, the reception was both overwhelming and sobering. News of their success had spread quickly, thanks to intercepted signals from the collapsing Vrax fleet. Crowds gathered outside the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, cheering and chanting their names. Banners reading "Heroes of Humanity" fluttered in the wind, and reporters swarmed the perimeter, desperate for interviews. But inside the building, the mood was far less celebratory. General Alan Carter greeted them personally, his stern expression betraying none of the pride or gratitude the public felt. "Good work," he said simply, though the weight of his words carried more meaning than any speech could. "You've given us a fighting chance. Now it's up to us to make sure we don't waste it." Laura stepped forward, holding out her device. "Sir, I've analyzed the Queen's neural pathways. There's a pattern here, a hierarchy. Each Queen operates independently, but they're linked through a primary node. If we can locate and destroy that node, we might collapse the entire system." Carter studied the holographic projections she projected onto the table. Lines of code and schematics floated in midair, highlighting key points in the Vrax network. "And where is this primary node located?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with urgency. "In their flagship," Laura answered. "The largest vessel in their fleet. It's heavily guarded, but if we concentrate our forces—" "It's a suicide mission," Carter interrupted bluntly. "Even with the intel you've provided, the odds are stacked against us. We need a better strategy." "We don't have time for better strategies," Kyle countered, stepping beside Laura. "Every second we wait gives them time to adapt, to rebuild. If we hit them now, hard and fast, we stand a chance. Otherwise, we're just delaying the inevitable." Carter's jaw tightened, his gaze shifting between the members of the team. He knew they were right, but sending soldiers into such a perilous mission went against every instinct he had as a leader. Still, the alternative, allowing the Vrax to regain their footing, was unthinkable. "Fine," he said after a long pause. "But you're not going in blind. I'll assemble a task force to support you. Fighters, capital ships, everything we've got. This isn't just your fight anymore. It's humanity's." The room fell silent as the weight of his decision sank in. Operation Black Dagger had evolved from a covert mission into a full-scale counteroffensive. For better or worse, the fate of humanity rested on what happened next. Preparations for the assault began immediately. The UEDF mobilized every available resource, deploying fleets to strategic locations throughout the solar system. Pilots trained relentlessly, honing their skills in simulated battles designed to mimic the chaos of combat against the Vrax. Engineers worked around the clock to upgrade weapon systems, incorporating insights gained from Laura's analysis of alien technology. Morale soared among the ranks, fueled by the belief that victory was within reach. Kyle found himself thrust into the spotlight, his role as a leader cemented by his actions during the Queenship infiltration. Dozens of pilots looked to him for guidance, eager to follow in his footsteps. At first, he struggled with the responsibility, haunted by memories of those who hadn't made it back. But as he spent more time with the recruits, sharing stories and offering advice, he began to embrace his new role. These men and women weren't just soldiers, they were humanity's last line of defense, and he owed it to them to prepare them as best he could. Megan, meanwhile, focused on refining her arsenal. With access to advanced materials and cutting-edge tech, she developed new types of explosives capable of penetrating even the toughest Virax armor. She also trained demolition teams, teaching them how to plant charges effectively and create diversions without sacrificing safety. Her reputation grew, earning her the nickname Demolition Angel, a title she accepted with quiet pride. Ethan remained largely solitary, preferring to work alone rather than integrate with larger groups. But his expertise proved invaluable during reconnaissance missions, where his precision and stealth allowed him to gather critical intelligence on enemy movements. Though he rarely spoke, his actions spoke volumes, earning him respect from even the most skeptical veterans. As for Laura, she became the linchpin of the operation. Her lab transformed into a hub of activity, filled with scientists, engineers, and strategists working together to turn her discoveries into actionable plans. She collaborated closely with General Carter, ensuring that every aspect of the mission was meticulously planned. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford, but she didn't complain, The stakes were too high to slow down now. The day of the final assault arrived sooner than anyone expected. The skies above Earth buzzed with activity as fleets prepared to launch, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Soldiers exchanged nervous glances, some clutching photos of loved ones, others muttering prayers under their breath. Despite the tension, there was an undeniable sense of unity, a shared purpose that transcended fear and doubt. Kyle stood at the front of the assembly hall, addressing the assembled troops. His voice rang clear and strong, carrying over the murmurs of anticipation. Today we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who came before us, for everyone who believed in a future worth protecting. The Vraks may be powerful, but they underestimate one thing: humanity, our resilience, our ingenuity, our refusal to give up. Today, we show them why they should have been afraid. Cheers erupted, echoing through the chamber as fists pumped into the air. Kyle exchanged a glance with Megan, who gave him a small nod of approval. Ethan stood nearby, his usual stoic demeanor softened slightly by the faintest hint of a smile. Laura watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. This was humanity at its finest, scarred but unbroken. The fleet surged forward, engines blazing like comets streaking across the void. Humanity's finest ships formed a tight formation, their hulls glinting under the dim light of distant stars. Fighters darted around the larger vessels, weaving through the darkness with practiced precision. The air crackled with tension, every soldier aware that this was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment that would decide the fate of their species. Kyle sat at the controls of his interceptor, fingers gripping the joystick as he guided his squadron toward the heart of the Vraks fleet. His headset buzzed with chatter from the other pilots, voices calm but tinged with anticipation. Each of them knew the risks, yet none faltered. They were united by a single purpose: to protect Earth and ensure humanity's survival. Behind him, Megan worked alongside her demolition team, double-checking the payloads strapped to their shuttles. Explosives designed to pierce even the toughest Vraks armor lined the cargo holds, each charge meticulously calibrated for maximum impact. Her hands moved swiftly, her focus unwavering despite the chaos surrounding her. "Ready when you are," she said into her comm, her voice steady and confident. Ethan floated silently in the shadows of his stealth fighter, invisible to enemy sensors. His rifle rested across his lap, its scope scanning the horizon for signs of movement. He didn't speak often, but his presence inspired quiet confidence among those who knew him. When the time came, he would strike without hesitation, eliminating key targets with deadly accuracy. At the center of it all, Laura monitored the operation from the bridge of the command ship. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing real-time updates on enemy positions, fleet movements, and potential vulnerabilities. She adjusted her glasses, squinting at the data streaming across the screens. Every piece of information mattered. Every second counted. Beside her, General Carter stood stoically, his arms crossed as he observed the unfolding battle with grim determination. The Vraks flagship loomed ahead, a monstrous construct that dwarfed everything around it. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, pulsating veins of energy running beneath layers of organic tissue. Massive turrets bristled along its hull, ready to unleash torrents of plasma fire. Swarms of biomechanical drones patrolled the area, their insectoid forms darting through space like angry hornets guarding their nest. "This is it," Kyle muttered under his breath, his eyes locked on the target. No turning back now. As the fleet approached, alarms blared throughout the Vraks armada. Enemy ships peeled away from their positions, forming a defensive perimeter around the flagship. Plasma beams lanced through the void, forcing the human fleet to scatter and regroup. Pilots shouted warnings over the comms, dodging incoming fire while returning volleys of their own. Explosions lit up the battlefield, sending shockwaves rippling through the vacuum. Kyle led his squadron into the fray, weaving between bursts of energy as he closed the distance to the flagship. "Stay close," he barked into his headset. "We need to punch through their lines," His squad responded instantly, forming a tight wedge behind him. Missiles streaked past, narrowly missing their marks as the Vrax fighters swarmed around them. Kyle's reflexes kicked into overdrive, his instincts guiding him through the chaos. He fired short bursts from his cannons, taking down enemy drones with surgical precision. One by one, his teammates followed suit, carving a path through the swarm. Meanwhile, Megan's team launched their first wave of explosives, targeting the outer defenses of the flagship. The charges detonated with devastating force, tearing through layers of alien armor and exposing weak points beneath. Greenish fluids oozed from the wounds, pooling in the zero gravity like viscous clouds. The damage drew the attention of nearby Vrax ships, which broke formation to retaliate. But Megan anticipated their move, ordering her team to split up and create diversions. "Keep them busy," she commanded, her voice sharp but controlled. "We'll hit 'em where it hurts." Her plan worked. As the Vrax scrambled to respond, gaps appeared in their defenses, allowing Ethan to slip through unnoticed. From his vantage point, he identified critical targets, command nodes, power conduits, and weapon systems, and picked them off one by one. Each shot landed with pinpoint accuracy, crippling the enemy's ability to coordinate their attacks. Though his role was subtle, its effects rippled across the battlefield, giving humanity a crucial edge. Back on the command ship, Laura relayed Ethan's successes to General Carter. "Their network is weakening," she reported, pointing to a flickering section of the hologram. "If we can maintain this pressure, we might be able to disable their primary node." Carter nodded, issuing orders to reinforce the assault. Reinforcements poured into the breach created by Kyle's squadron, pushing deeper into enemy territory. Capital ships unleashed barrages of missiles and laser fire, hammering away at the flagship's exposed core. The sheer scale of the attack overwhelmed the Vrax, forcing them onto the defensive for the first time in the war. But the Vrax weren't defeated yet. With a deafening roar, the flagship unleashed its full arsenal, obliterating several human vessels in a single volley. Panic rippled through the fleet as survivors scrambled to regroup. Kyle gritted his teeth, rallying his squadron to press forward despite the losses. "Hold the line," he shouted. "We're almost there." Laura watched the carnage unfold, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew they couldn't afford to falter. Not now. Summoning every ounce of courage, she patched into the main channel. "All units, listen up. We've located the primary node. It's embedded deep within the flagship's core. If we can overload it, we can bring the entire system down." Her words sparked a renewed sense of urgency. Pilots redoubled their efforts, fighting with desperate ferocity to reach the target. Kyle led the charge, his interceptor skimming dangerously close to the flagship's hull. Plasma beams grazed his wings, leaving scorch marks but failing to deter him. Behind him, Megan's team planted fresh charges, creating explosions that tore through the ship's defenses. Ethan continued his relentless assault, picking off any reinforcements that dared approach. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the team breached the flagship's inner sanctum. The chamber housing the primary node was unlike anything they had encountered before. A pulsating mass of glowing tissue suspended in a web of biomechanical tendrils. Energy coursed through the structure, feeding the hive mind network that connected every Vrax vessel in the fleet. "This is it," Laura whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and dread. "Take it out, and we win." Megan stepped forward, holding a specialized explosive designed to disrupt the node's connection. "Stand back," she ordered, setting the charge with practiced efficiency. "This thing's gonna blow big." Kyle and Ethan covered her, firing at incoming drones and keeping the area clear. Once the charge was set, Megan signaled for everyone to retreat. They sprinted toward the exit, hearts racing as the countdown began. Behind them, the chamber erupted in a blinding flash of green light, the explosion shaking the entire ship. Alarm screamed as the flagship's systems collapsed, severing the link to the rest of the fleet. Outside, the effects were immediate. Vrax ships drifted aimlessly, their coordination shattered. Without the guidance of the hive mind, they became disoriented and vulnerable. Human forces seized the opportunity, launching a final devastating assault that wiped out the remnants of the enemy armada. As the dust settled, silence fell over the battlefield. The once imposing Vrax fleet lay in ruins, its queens silenced forever. Cheers erupted from the surviving human ships, echoing through the void like a symphony of triumph. Kyle leaned back in his seat, exhaling deeply as the weight of the mission lifted from his shoulders. Megan smiled faintly, her usual sarcasm replaced by genuine relief. Ethan lowered his rifle, his sharp eyes softening as he gazed at the wreckage. And Laura allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, tears welling in her eyes as she thought of all they had sacrificed to reach this point. General Carter's voice crackled over the comms, breaking the spell. "Mission accomplished," he said simply, his tone heavy with emotion. "You've done your people proud." For a brief moment, the enormity of their victory sank in. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged victorious, not because they were stronger or faster, but because they refused to give up. Together, they had proven that resilience, ingenuity, and sheer willpower could overcome even the most insurmountable odds. And though the scars of battle would remain for years to come, one truth stood undeniable. Humanity had fought back against the galactic predators and won.